All right, hello. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. My name is Maughn Gregory, and I'm the director of the Institute for the Advancement of Philosophy for Children at Montclair State University, which was co-founded, of course, by Matthew Lipman, whose 100th birthday we're going to be celebrating this week. And we're very delighted and honored today to have his daughter Karen with us to be interviewed. This is part of the IAPC's Oral History Project, which Peter Shea has been doing for us for several years now. I'm going to introduce my colleague Megan Laverty. She is a professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. She's just had dental surgery, so she's not going to be speaking today, but she has been planning this with us, and we're delighted to have her here. Peter, would you kindly introduce yourself?
I'm Peter Shea, and I trained with your father about 1978, 79 at a honeymoon resort in the Poconos, and then had sort of occasional conversations for decades as I tried to make things happen in the Minnesota public schools. Eventually ended up editing one of his publications, and so had that relation. So I've known him. I got to sit with him and Theresa at the 30th anniversary of Philosophy for Children celebration, which was a thrill. I've known him in that kind of way, but not well. And the others on the screen have, of course, known him much better, though not for longer, oddly. So they handed me this responsibility of being the interviewer because for about 26 years I ran a television show where I talked to people in roughly this sort of way, and they think I might have some magic left. I'm not sure I do, but in any case, I'll do my darndest. The basic format is we run, if it's okay with you, at least my piece of this runs an hour from the time we start. And I will kind of do the beginning questions and the lead questions, and then from time to time I'll open it for Maughn and Megan if they have anything they'd like to ask, and if they feel very strongly they can break in. This is not, we're not going to be autocratic about it. So we'll think of this as an hour-long session from roughly now. Does that work for you?
Sure.
Great. Okay. With this sort of interview, I generally like to start with a kind of opening statement from my guest, just so I ask the most general possible question, which is, for this interview, what was it like to have Matthew Lipman as a father? We all have known him as, as a teacher, as a colleague, as a boss, but you're the only one around who knew him as a father. So what was that like?
My dad was a fantastic father. He was a fun dad. He was always full of stories and full of jokes. And he was amazing. That's the only way I can really put it. He was amazing. My dad loved cats. I don't know if you know that about my dad. He used to have a cat when I was little named Sinbad. And Sinbad used to walk around the corner with my father. So he used to take walks with the cat. Because of that, my dad used to make up stories about a cat named Sinbad and his girlfriend, Wilma Deering. And he used to tell us stories about how they used to venture into outer space. And I just remember wonderful things. My dad actually built a tree house for myself and my brother when we were little. He was just an amazing father. That's all I can really say.
The BBC documentary features a cat prominently, so I know that the cats were important.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, we met the other day just to remember the timeline as your dad set it up in his autobiography. And as we're looking at that, the first period of kind of interaction was when you all were living together, right? In Montclair
Yes.
and in New York. And so we're kind of thinking there's that period, and there's the period where he says he was, taking you to school and driving to Newark from Montclair to take you to school. And then there's, the later period. And we're sort of thinking maybe there'd be different stories from different periods. I'm curious how it was when you were all living together.
Well, that was amazing. Those were the times that we would decorate the house for Christmas with my dad with the lights. We would play out in the snow and have snowball fights. My dad would have this wonderful thing. Halloween is my favorite holiday because of my father. He would have he would make a haunted house in the basement of our house for the neighborhood children. And they would all come over. We had boiled eggs as eyeballs and spaghetti as guts. And we would blindfold us and we would touch all this stuff and be scared and run screaming from the house. So it was always fun with my father. It was great. He would help us with our homework. That was the usual thing that he would do at night. And then he would grade papers. I remember the exams, the students' exams and the blue books that he used to grade papers all the time. Also growing up, when he was writing Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery, he would spend a lot of time in the office. He had an office on the second floor, and he would type on an old typewriter. He typed everything on paper. And I remember when he was putting the book together, we would actually have to collate papers in the basement. We had a big table and we would collate papers in the basement. I remember doing that. I remember when he used to go to New York, he was teaching at Columbia. He had a little sports car, and I can't remember what kind of car it was, but I know it was a stick shift because I remember getting in the car with my brother and we would barely fit, but he would take us for a ride once in a while. But he would take that little car and he would drive to New York and he would find a parking place near Columbia. I don't know how he did it, but he would do it every day. And he would park and he would teach and he would come home. My dad was usually late coming home. It would be about 7:00 at night, but we would stay up to be with my father. And those are the things that I really remember from living in Montclair.
It must have been a pretty demanding life for him. I mean, what time did he leave in the morning? Do you know?
Wow, my dad was an early riser. He would get up at 5 and he would probably leave around 6:30, and he wouldn't get home till around 7:00 at night. Later, he would take the bus. I remember he would take the bus instead of driving to New York, but yes, it was demanding for him.
Yeah. Wow. And he had all the energy to do all these things with his kids when he came home.
Well, yes, he did. Wow. He did.
So what kind of a home did you have in Montclair? Do you remember?
Yes, I was 121 Chestnut Street. In Montclair, it was a split level house, and we had a big backyard and a nice front yard, and it was a beautiful suburban neighborhood.
Well, so were weekends different from weekdays? Or, I mean, you didn't have to go into the office then, right?
No, we used to spend a lot of time, mostly with my dad and my mom. on weekends. We would spend times together. My mom loved to shop, so lots of times we went on shopping trips on the weekends. A lot of the time, my dad was working though in his study. He would be writing. And we would watch TV, play. It was an enjoyable childhood.
Wow. Now, in talking about how Harry came to be and about sort of the whole idea of doing novels, he credits early conversations with his kids as part of the inspiration for his work in philosophy for children, his founding of this new way of engaging with kids. Do you remember any of those conversations?
Not exactly. I remember talking with my father. A lot of time we would spend together was fun times. Maybe he took ideas from those times. My dad was a Trekkie. I remember growing up watching Star Trek. I think it was Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. We would always watch TV and watch Star Trek. It's possible some of the conversations that I had with my dad had an effect on him. I'm surprised that they did because I don't know what I had to say. It might be that my dad, I think everything that he took into the program kind of was a way that he raised us. He raised us to think. He raised us, if we did something that he may consider he needed to talk to us about, he would talk to us. He would always talk to us and discuss things and talk about how things were going on in school. And there were always discussions, and maybe that was what he took into the program. I always remember having discussions with my father, not exactly what they were, but that he liked to talk and he liked to discuss things.
I think the Matt Lipman fans around the world will be excited to learn that he was a Trekkie, because this piece of information, as far as I know, not been recorded anywhere. So I've got to follow up with this. Are there other things that he was interested in? I mean, we've got a fan club out there for this interview. I mean, black licorice or
Yes.
watching Orioles or absolutely anything that because people knew him. I mean, he was not a stiff guy, but people knew him as in a professional way, and
Yeah.
all of these details are really helpful. So anything else you could tell us about the stuff he liked, or the stuff he liked to do, or the stuff he hated, or anything?
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of things my dad loved to go to New York. There was just something about New York that attracted him. He used to take us to the Museum of Natural History. We used to go to the planetarium, lots of museums. Interesting things about my dad probably are more about when he was little. My dad was raised on a farm, and his father was an inventor, and he actually invented a fountain for chickens so that their water would not freeze in the wintertime. His family later on took on the business when he went into the Army, and he later went into school. He didn't stay in the family business, but my Uncle Mickey, his brother, did. And also my Uncle Harold. I don't know if you knew my dad had a couple brothers, but I knew both of them very well. Another interesting story is how my dad and my mom met. My father and my mother actually met on an ocean liner going to Paris. My dad was in the army, and my mother was going to the Sorbonne in Paris to learn cooking. She knew how to cook, but she wanted to go to the Sorbonne. And they met, they dated in Paris for 2 weeks, and they got married. So that's a very interesting that's a very interesting story. I think it's a wonderful story. I think they forever through their lives really loved each other. When my mom was sick, when she was in the hospital, my dad actually came to visit her with Terry to see her. And it was just amazing to see the two of them together. They still really cared about each other a lot. Trying to think of other interesting stories. My uncle told me this story about my dad when he was little. My dad came in and he was eating cookies. And he didn't realize for some reason, he was really young, he might have been 3 or 4, that there were ants on the cookies, and he was still eating them. And my uncle thought that was the funniest thing. My dad was the king of corny jokes. I can't really remember any exactly, except for one which was kind of morbid. We used to drive by this cemetery on the Garden State Parkway, and it was a huge cemetery. I mean, I guess he wanted us to laugh because it was so sad to see the cemetery. And he said, how many people out there do you think have passed on? And my brother and I were like, 500, 100, something like that. And my dad said, no, all of them. He was just the king of the corny jokes. If he could find something corny to say, he had something corny to say. It was always something funny and hilarious with him. He told us a lot of jokes when we were little. He made us laugh a lot of the time. I'm trying to think of anything else about my dad. He used to take us to New York. He always would take us to get pizza. And we would go to a restaurant in New York, and I can't remember the name of it, but we would get crepes. I guess my dad found a love of them when he was in Paris. So that's about all I can really think of. He used to take us to Woody Allen movies. He used to love Woody Allen and also any kind of like independent films. I still watch independent films because of my dad, because he took us to see a lot of them. He loved the movies too.
So you were mentioning the uncle. So you were all in pretty regular touch with the extended family then.
Yes, because my
and uncles and things.
Yes, well, actually, I did meet my grandmother, my dad's mother, when I was little. She passed away when I was about 13 years old. She was a wonderful cook. She used to make us matzo ball soup, and she was really wonderful. She lived in New York City. My uncle Mickey, who was my dad's older brother, he lived in New Jersey, and we kept in touch with him. I kept in touch with him a lot after my dad passed away, just to keep in touch. And he wanted to know more about my dad as an adult than he did as my dad when he was little. They kept in touch, but because my dad was so busy with the Institute, they didn't get to see each other that much. My Uncle Harold unfortunately passed away from cancer. He lived in New York with his wife. Around the time that I was about 20 years old. He really loved both my uncles.
Now you mentioned your brother Will. Did you have the same relationship to your father, do you think, or were there differences between the way you interacted with your father and the way Will interacted? You were very close in age.
Yes, I think we had the same relationship when we were little. I think that when my mother moved to Newark and we were apart for a few years, we would see my dad. But I think that when my brother moved back to Montclair, as my brother was older, he was able to see my father more often. That's when he was married to Isabel. I think he was able to see my dad more often than I was. But I don't think there was really a difference at all. I think he was just able to see him more often than I was. I was in Newark. I was going to graduate school. My brother was in Montclair, so I think that they were probably able to see each other more often than I was. I didn't see much of my parents when I was in graduate school, even though I lived with my mother. I was pretty busy with school, and I didn't really spend the time with them that I should have, which I really regret. I wish I could have spent more time with them then.
So in those early days, I mean, when you were sort of living together, I mean, it must have been something strange because you had, I mean, these are two really high-powered people, and they're high-powered people in different ways. I mean, way different ways, interested in different things. What, did you have like, were there like conversations around the dinner table, or what was it like to have these two terribly energetic people in the same house?
Well, I don't think growing up I really realized what was going on around me. I knew there was a lot going on. We actually had 3 phone extensions. My mom had 2 because she was always on the phone, and my father had 1. He was in his office a lot of the time, typing and writing and reading. My dad loved to read. So my dad was more of a private person. He was more into what he was doing and what he was building. My mother, because I think everything was political, she was on the phone a lot of the time. She was in conversations with people. The phone was ringing constantly. She was having PTA meetings in our home. That's what I remember when she first got involved in politics. It started with the PTA. So she had a lot of PTA meetings, a lot of people in our home. So I remember it was a little different with my mom than it was with my dad, but they were still very much my parents. My mom always had dinner on the table. My dad always either brought home flowers. My mom loved her garden, so we always had fresh flowers on the table. It was a normal childhood. Other than them being busy, I didn't really notice anything different or anything spectacularly different because I think my friends' parents were also involved in a lot of things. So I didn't see it as being different or odd, if I can say that. They were just busy.
So, I mean, one thing that you've got to realize that your dad may become the source of an academic enterprise. People may be writing about him 100 years from now, depending on how fashions go. And one thing they're going to ask, and they'll kill me if I don't ask it here, is do you think, what do you know, if anything, no reason you should know something, but about how your mother influenced your dad or how your dad influenced your mother? Because anybody who looks at these 2 biographies is going to say, potentially, they had a lot to talk about. And do you have a sense of that? Do you recall anything that might sort of illuminate that for some poor future graduate student who's trying to make some hay on this matter?
Um, as far as influence, I just think that they were mentally, intellectually matches. I mean, they could understand each other and they were involved with each other. I don't think there was a meshing of the political life with the educational life that my father had, except for the fact that my mom did start out as a teacher. So they were both teachers. So that might be the connection that they had. But as far as boosting each other, it was just a natural thing. I don't think there was anything spectacular or special or anything that, other than them being two very special people. I think they were two very special and individual people that came together. And I think that is probably what made it special. They both had things about them that made them spectacular. My father, his understanding of people and his love for children and education. And my mom, her love for the community and trying to enhance the community in any way she could. I think just them being two special people and that they were together made a difference. I don't think it was a common focus or a common interest other than education, maybe, that pulled them together.
Right.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's about time for me to open the floor to the other folks in the Hollywood squares. So yeah.
So first, just thank you, Karen, for what you were just talking about. Coincidentally, Megan and I right now are working on a paper looking at this last novel that your father wrote, Mark, which is about politics
okay.
and society. And it just strikes us. It's just, you know, every chapter through and through is with political issues. And so I can't help but assume, or I guess wonder, if your mother's career and work didn't make your father at least somewhat more politically aware, or of maybe aware of particular political issues going on around Newark or with the African American community, or just more politically aware in general, would you say?
It might have. I think maybe later in life, my dad did delve into my mother's career and into what she was doing. A lot of what she did involved social issues, family issues, issues for women and children. And that might have been probably something that they had in common. I know they stayed in contact over the years and they were really close as the years went on. He probably followed her career and saw the things that she was doing. I don't know if you know about Wynona's house in Newark. That might have been something that
Can you just give us a sentence for the interview? Tell us what Wynona's house is. I've been reading about it, but can you just tell us briefly?
Oh, okay. Wynona's house is a place really for children that have had issues to be able to be comfortable, instead of, for example, having to deal with a police interrogation in a police station. It's just a place that is positive for children. And I think that that's something my dad was always concerned with, is the issues that have to do with children and their lives and aspects of their lives. Even if they are negative, that they'll have a place to go and feel safe.
We should just say on the record that Wynona is her mother's name. So
Yes.
her name was Wynona Moore. And then
it's actually Wynona.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wynona. Thank you.
That's okay.
And she's in most of the records I've seen. She went by Wynona M. Lipman. M being her maiden name Moore. Yeah.
Yes.
Can I also just ask? I just want to get again, just for the record. You and Will both did college, right? Can you just tell me where?
Yes. Well, my brother went to Seton Hall.
Okay.
And I went to Rutgers University in New Brunswick.
And do you know what he studied? Do you remember?
Not exactly. My brother wasn't able to finish college because he did get sick, and he passed away from cancer. When he was in school, most of what I remember of my brother was when he was in Seton Hall Prep, which was high school.
When Seton Hall Prep, so that's closer to Montclair, right? Was he
No, South Orange. No, it was South Orange.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I used to live right by it. So he was still living in Newark when he was doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know how my mother did it, but she used to take my brother to Seton Hall. I was in Newark Academy in Livingston. She used to drive me there, and then she used to drive to Trenton. So I don't know how she did it. She used to pick us up also. So I don't know how she did it.
And what did you study?
When I was at Rutgers, economics and English. Then I went to graduate school at Rutgers Graduate School of Management in Newark for an MBA.
Nice.
Yeah.
I had just one other question from something you said earlier on. I was really struck. I wrote it down. You said that your father raised you to think.
Yes, he did.
I just want to ask a little bit more about that. You mentioned the discussions that he had with you. Would it be fair to say that he was interested in your ideas and opinions?
I think so. From what I can remember, he would always ask questions. If I did something in school or had a friend or something, he would ask me, well, how do you feel about that person? Or how do you feel about that? Which was interesting because I'm beginning to understand that that's different from the way most parents raise their children, that he asked questions. He wanted to know, where'd you meet that person in school? How do you feel about that person? What kind of person is this? Just questions and just trying to find out how I felt about things. I think he was very interested. And I think that just became normal for me. I think it was just a normal thing. I never thought of it as different until I got older. And then, my friends would tell me, oh no, my parents never asked me questions. They never asked me how I cared about this or how I felt about this. And I was like, really? And I think that was just different for me because I expected that. It was just part of my lifestyle and part of growing up. Actually, both my parents would ask me questions about how I felt about things and how I thought about things. And I think I just was very lucky in the way I was raised. I feel very lucky to have the parents that I had. And that's just the way I feel. I feel very happy and very lucky to have had them. They're still a huge influence on my life and the way I feel about things and the way I think about things. the way I deal with relationships and other people. And it's because of them, because they were so positive and encouraging. Encouraging is a big word. They would encourage me to do better and to be better and to be a good friend and to be a good influence on people. And I think that that is the most amazing thing about them. They trusted me, which is another thing. They trusted me. They never questioned really anything that I did or I asked or anything that I said because they felt confident in the way that they had raised me. And I think that's very important. And I think that's why I feel so lucky that, they trusted in me because of how they had raised me and the things that they had done. And I'm very proud of them. I just want to say that. I'm very proud of them for everything that they did and the accomplishments that they made in life as well as in their work. I think that both of them, their careers were extremely important to them. What they were doing for other people was extremely important for them. And I think that that was what made them special people. And that's why I'm so proud of them, I think.
Anything else?
Yeah, just a couple more that occurred to me. So your father dedicated one of the issues of the Thinking Journal to your brother after he passed away, and used a photo of Will as a child for the cover of that issue of the journal, and inside he dedicates it to Will. And so I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about Will. Like, what was he like as a child, and what was your relationship like with him?
Oh, okay. I remember as a child, Will and I played together a lot. We spent a lot of time together. As he got older, my brother was really influenced by jazz. That was one of his main influences. He had an extensive record collection that they now have at the Newark Museum, actually. He liked to read like my father. He liked to study. The most that I really remember about my brother, because when I went to college, we were apart, was that he got married. He was very happily married. As far as a relationship with him, we kind of went our separate ways as teenagers because he had his friends and I had my friends, which were kind of separate. But other than that, we spent a lot of our childhood together until we became teenagers. I think that the separation came when we were in 8th and 9th grade, because his friends became very important to him and mine became very important to me. And it was just a natural thing. Once you become a
different high
teenager.
schools, right?
Yeah, we did.
How did that happen?
Yeah. We actually, I'm not exactly sure how that happened. We actually went to the same, I wouldn't call it a grade school. It was a school from, I believe, 1st grade to 9th grade called Farbrook in Short Hills.
Yeah. What kind of a school?
And
Do you remember? What kind of a school was it?
It was a private school. It was a very interesting school because I think my parents had to pick this school. It was kind of interesting. We would put on a Shakespeare play once a year. It was kind of a farm because there was a donkey and chickens, and it was a very interesting school. We went on a ski trip. I remember that. We went to Vermont. It was very and I want to use the word experimental. It was kind of an experimental school.
Was it religious?
And I think, no, it wasn't religious. I think Farbrook still exists because I think I still get things in the mail from them. They're in Short Hills. It's a private school, but they were just very experimental in the things that they taught and the way that they taught. We were taught square dancing. I remember playing field hockey. A lot of the courses were very student focused. They would focus a lot on how the students were learning and what we were learning. And it was just a very interesting school. Newark Academy was more of a regular private school to me, where we were all just basically on our own and had to learn on our own. Farbrook was more of a student-focused school where they were concerned with how each student was learning, and it was a smaller school, much smaller. So I think Farbrook was.
Sorry, did you do Farbrook grades 1 through 9? Like starting when you were
No, I was only there for 9th grade, and my brother was there for 8th grade.
Oh, I see.
And that was kind of where we started making our own friends and kind of growing up and becoming teenagers.
And before that, were you in public schools in Montclair and Newark?
I was never in public school in Newark. I actually went to Newark Academy, which had moved to Livingston from Newark. My brother went to Seton Hall. We went to public schools in Montclair when we were there. And I also always dreamed of going to Montclair High School, which I never got to do because we lived on the street where all the Montclair High School students used to walk up and down the street going to school. And I see the Letterman jackets and everything. And I wanted to go to Montclair High. But it just didn't end up that way. I ended up going to Newark Academy, which was a great school. But I remember Montclair because I grew up there as a child. That's where I spent most of my childhood, riding bicycles and climbing trees and doing things that most kids do. When I moved to Newark, it was a little different because my mother was in the Senate, and she was pretty busy. We were in school most of the time. When we weren't in school, we were home. And that's kind of how those years went before I went to college.
Can I ask about religion in your home growing up? In your dad's autobiography, he talks about that when he was bar mitzvahed, he made the deal with his parents that he hated the training for that. It was just like, memorize these lines. You don't have to understand what they mean. Just memorize the sound so you can stand up and do it. And he said that he made a deal with his parents that if he did that after that, he would be in charge of his own religious life from then on. And they agreed. And he writes that he didn't have a lot to do with religion after that. But I mean, you mentioned celebrating Christmas. Was your mother religious? Was there religion in your home? Was it part of your
Actually, there wasn't. Because both my parents, I think they were both so busy with their careers. The one thing they did do, they sent my brother and I to the Unitarian Church when we were growing up. When we were little, actually.
Montclair.
The one in Montclair. We went to the Unitarian Church, and that is such an experimental, I wouldn't say experimental, but it's a very different church. It wasn't extremely religious. It wasn't strict. I'll just put it that way. There was a lot of thinking and education and things involved. I don't think my parents were, even though they went to church when they were little, my dad, basically he wasn't involved in religion at all. I think his brothers were more than he was. He was more interested in education and what he was doing. And my mom, Even though she did go to church later in life, she went back to church. At that time, she wasn't concerned with religion. My mother was big on holidays. So we did celebrate Christmas. We celebrated Thanksgiving. Those were the two big holidays. I don't think it was specifically religious. We didn't do prayers or pray or anything like that. It was more of a celebration for the family. I have to put it that way. Family members, we would get together when we could. Now, my mother's family was far away. Her sister was in Georgia. One of her brothers was in Detroit, and her other brother was in North Carolina. So we rarely saw them. And for my dad, I think because they lived so far away, one of his brothers was in New York and the other one was in South Jersey, that we rarely had real big family celebrations. But we would talk on the phone, and that's how I got to know them growing up. Mostly was on the phone, other than seeing them. They, I think it was more, like I said, of a family celebration, a celebration of what to be thankful for than anything else. It wasn't really religious.
Anything else, Mom? Well, I mean, in the autobiography, your dad talks about the break after, with him and Wynona being in separate households, and then eventually dissolving the marriage. It was a big break, and he talks about driving your kids to school in Newark and such like, but I'm surely having lots less to do with you. Can you say anything? And then he remarried, not terribly long after the divorce to Theresa. Can you say anything about how stuff changed for you in that period after the split? With your relationships with your father, the kinds of things you did with him, that kind of stuff.
I don't think there was really any change. My parents, as I said, with their careers, they were always busy. They always had time for us, but they were generally busy. When I could, because I was in school, I generally would see my dad on the weekends, and he would be there every weekend that he could. Like I said, he would take us to New York for pizza and take us to the museums and take us to movies. I think that my parents broke up. My parents broke up basically because I think their careers took them in two different directions. They were both very focused on what they were doing. And I think that was more of it than anything else. When my dad remarried, I would see him and Terry on the weekends when I could. By that time, I was in school, I was in college and I was in graduate school. So I didn't see him as much as I would have then, but that was because of the way my life was going and school and graduate school and everything else. Other than him, he was always willing to see us. He wanted to see us. We kept in contact with my dad by phone when we moved to Newark, more than seeing him. Now, I did see him a lot on weekends. When I first moved to Newark, there was a stable. My brother and I took horseback riding lessons. And my dad would take us on Sundays down to the stable. We were training for the rodeo, believe it or not. My brother and I took trail rides out to Branch Brook Park. The stable was near Branch Brook Park in Newark. And the cowboy that ran the stable, unfortunately, like a year later, had to go to Central Jersey, so we stopped going. But my dad used to take us there every weekend to go horseback riding, to take the trail rides out. We kept in contact pretty much. Even when after he married Terry, we would go over and see him and Terry in Montclair. They were living on Park Street at the time, and we kept in touch with them pretty much. My brother did more so when he moved back to Montclair. He left Newark with his wife and moved back to Montclair, so he saw my dad more often. But that was about it. I don't think there was really any change.
I was lucky to have met Terry a couple of times. I remember sitting with her and Matt at the 30th anniversary, and I asked how long they'd been married, and she said, "Well, we were married 30 years. We've just lived down the age difference between us." Which is the kind of thing Terry said, but I didn't know her. I didn't know her nearly as well as I wanted to. Any impressions of how she was, or I mean, she had this way of always saying something that you remembered. I don't know why, but the kinds of things she said were like that, and you just remembered them. How'd you get along?
Very well. Terry and I were not far. We were pretty close in age, actually. I think Terry was 19 when she and my dad got married. Terry was, I'd say, an old soul. And I think that's why she and my dad got along so well, because my dad and Terry never owned a TV. They both read a lot. They would read a lot. They would go out. They liked to go out to dinner and go out to lunch. She was an old soul. She would pretty much was a homebody. She would stay home. She would help my dad and be there for my dad. And they rarely really traveled a lot because my dad was getting older in years. He wasn't traveling as much as he was earlier. But she was kind of a nice and quiet person. She did, like I said, she did a lot of reading. She was a very religious person, and she would go to church. She would go actually to New York. She would drive to New York. I can't remember the name of the cathedral, but she would go and help in a cathedral in New York on Sundays. And she would get up early in the morning and she would drive. And that was pretty much her biggest trip during the week. Other than that, she was pretty much home. She and my dad were very happy. Other than that, I don't remember too much about Terry. I mean, we used to talk. My dad would put her on the phone when he would call me, and we would talk for a little bit. She would ask me how I was doing and what I was doing and things like that. And she was just a very nice person.
Maughn, anything further on your side?
It just occurred to me to ask, I assume, did you meet Ann Sharp once in a while? Do you remember her?
I do remember her once in a while when I would go to the Institute. Now, I would stop, lots of times I would go and visit my dad at the Institute because that's the only time I could really get him. So I would see him for a few minutes. I would drive up there and spend a few hours with him and then go home. I did meet her a couple of times. Now, I remember she was very busy. I remember that. But I didn't know her very well. And part of it was because I was so young, and these were my dad's constituents, and people that he was working with. So I didn't really get to know them very well, but they knew who I was when I would come, and I knew who they were. And
The old
I would see them at
greenhouse?
the institute.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
This is when it was in the old greenhouse. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. That's when I would come and visit him. I remember when he moved, I don't think I ever went to the new location. But I remember that's where I spent most of my life, in the old greenhouse.
My parents have both passed, and so I'm sort of discovering as things go on what it is I have of theirs. What it is that I do that they used to, or what it is that they did that I can't do and wish I could, and all that sort of thing. See, at a certain point, I'm 71, and you begin to kind of look back and sort of sort out what the legacy was. I guess that's something I'd like to know as you think back, where you've landed now and what you're doing and what you've done with your life. Do you see your parents in yourself, or do you see ways that you ended up just a lot different? How's that work out for you?
Yeah, I do. I care a lot about people. I have not, there's no way I could ever reach the heights that they did and the things that they did. But in my life, as far as my friends and the people that I'm around and the way I treat people, comes from them. It really comes from them. I really think about what I say. I ask people how they feel about things, how they think about things. And I think that's what I took from them, is being kind, being kind to people, being a kind person and a friendly person, and always willing to accept new ideas and thoughts from other people, being open-minded about things. And I think that I got that from them. I've always tried my best to do right by my friends and family. And I think that's what I mostly have done with my life. That's the one thing I can say I'm proud about my life. As far as jobs and a career, it hasn't always been something that I've really wanted to do. It's just kind of where I ended up. But as far as my personal life and my life with friends and relatives, I've been able to be consistent and trusting and friendly, and all I can say is that really comes from them. Also, being involved in the community, doing things. I joined a sorority, and provide the community service, and I think that comes from them. I hope that I have honored their legacy. I haven't necessarily been part of their legacy. I haven't been around as much as I would like to be, and been involved. But I think that considering my life, I have tried to do my best to follow in their path and honor their beliefs and traditions and the things that they believed in and wanted for other people. And I think that's, if anything I leave as a legacy, that's probably it.
Now, this doesn't have to apply to you, but when I go through, do that exercise, I mean, another thing that sometimes comes up is just, there are ways in which I am different from my parents, you know. And sometimes it's just, you know, it isn't worse, it isn't better, it's just, you know, I could never do it that way. And sometimes it's, I could never accomplish what they were able to accomplish. I have, you know, it's a whole mix of things, but do you find, you know, thinking about yourself and thinking, you know, now that you know yourself, you know, with the age you are, do you find that you're a seriously different person than they are in some ways?
I don't think I'm very different. I think that their accomplishments are something that I could never live up to. I mean, I could never be them. The things that they did were amazing. I knew I was different from my mother many, many years ago, watching her, because my mother was always, like I said, on the phone. She was always in a conversation with someone about something she could do. Later in life, when she was in the Senate, and we were living in Newark, my mother's phone number was published. So pretty much anyone that wanted to reach out to her that needed help or needed anything could call her. She was up all hours of the night. I don't know when she got sleep. She was always there for the public. And I think to a certain extent, unlike my dad, I'm more of a private person, to the extent that he was there doing what he needed to do. But then again, he also had his private life with Terry, or he had his private life with my mom. I think I'm more like that than that of my mother, who her life was open. Her life was open 24/7. And I think I know I'm a lot different from that. I think I'm more like my father, a little more reserved. I'm quiet. I like to read. I don't own a television. So I'm a little bit more like my dad. But as far as being different, I think that's about it. I'm more of a private person. I'm a quiet person and a private person. And I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah. It's not so terribly different from my experience. My dad read books and thought about them, and didn't have the slightest inclination to tell people what he thought. You know, it's like, this is my business. These are my books, which isn't mad at all, but it wasn't my mother's way of going at things quite. Well, Maughn, you got anything? I'm just ignoring Megan because I'm sure this dental thing is a problem. But Maughn, any last questions or?
No, I think the last two question and responses were just a beautiful way to wrap up. I think this is
Fine.
Wonderful.
Fine.
So
Well,
let me say thanks again, Karen. This is so generous of you. We really appreciate that. I think I know that I'm speaking for all of us. We heard things we've never known before, and that's really precious.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And as the person engaged with oral history, it is amazing how useful some small thing can turn out to be. I mean, somebody is going to think about the fact that that first experimental school you went to was something Matt had a chance to take seriously. That's going to go get into the biography because it's not, it wasn't, we didn't think about that. I mean, we didn't know that. So you never know what detail will turn out to be really, really central. And it's so good to have just the full range of reminiscences to work with. So thank you. It's an honor to do this kind of thing. Thank you for taking the time.
So, Karen, so nice to meet you. So I feel so touched. You, you, you know that with the mentors, we have a kind of parental relationship. So I feel in a sense so close to you, having your father as an academic father, something like that.
That's wonderful.
So for me, it's very touching, and I thank you so much. This opportunity to know each other and to be able to listen to you about other dimensions of your father. You know that Matthew Lipman is a strong name in many countries around the world in the field of philosophy for children. So to hear the voice of someone who has been a child with the creator of philosophy for children, I think it's something very important. I wonder even necessary. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
No problem. Thank you.
And so may I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
So one has to do with the fact that your father was a philosopher dedicated to childhood, to children. So he created the Philosophy for Children program. So did you feel this in some way? Do you think that you, as a father, this influenced the way he was a father with you? How do you say that? Is there any senses in which you recognize that your father was a philosopher?
Yes, I do, because what I remember, and a lot of what I remember of my father was just fun. He was a fun dad. We had fun together. He was concerned with what we thought about things and the way that we thought about things. I can't give you an exact experience where he asked us, but it was just the way that he treated us. He would always ask questions. He would want to know how we felt about things, instead of being a parent maybe that would tell you, no, you're doing the wrong thing, or you made a mistake, or whatever. My father would always ask, how do you feel about what happened, or how do you feel about what you did? It was more of questions than to make us realize and to make us think about what we did, instead of telling us, oh no, go to your room or whatever. He would more ask questions about, how do you think about this? How do you feel about this? And I think that's where the philosopher came through. And he was always thinking about things, and studying and reading. And I think that is more what I remember about my father more than anything. And I think the way I am today, the way I think about things and the way I question things, the way I question people, how I feel about life, comes from him. I don't make quick judgments about people. I'm more open-minded and open to ideas and concepts and things. And I think that comes from him, more than anyone. People tell me I'm different, and I think that comes from him. I've never met anyone like you. You're so different, and I don't know where that comes from and I don't know what they mean, but I think it comes from my father and just his concepts of life and being open to people and open to thinking of new things and new ways to do things and just life in general. He was just happy with life and living life. And I think all of that is in me somewhere. I can't think of one special time. I wish I could, where I can tell you a conversation that we had where we could sit down and he told me something spectacular, but it was more in just the way he was. He was just a kind and loving person. He was a friendly person. He was someone that if you had a problem, you could always come to him and he would help you. He was just that kind of person. And that's why I love my dad so much, I think, because he was always there for me. He was always there for other people or people in need. I wish I could tell you what made him a philosopher, but I think it was just his general outlook on life that made him that way.
You tell
and where that came from?
Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
I'm saying where that came from, I don't know.
But you told us a lot about him as a philosopher, because for many people, philosophy is precisely a way of life or a way of relating to other people. So so you gave us a strong philosophical answer of how
Okay.
philosophy was. And also in a personal way, I share all these comments about the attention, the friendly way. Also, as my mentor, I think that also I could say that more than the content or theories, I learned from him exactly what you said, a way to relate to thinking, to people, to actions, a way of making a question instead of making a moral judgment. So it's very meaningful what you say. It speaks about philosophy. And you know that philosophy for children puts together philosophy and childhood. And you say how your father, how Matthew Lipman had a philosophical life. I wonder if he also had a childlike life. I mean, if he also, as an adult, he also kept alive his child, and he kind of, this I learned from a girl once in a school in Italy. She told me that philosophy was invented by a woman that didn't want to forget that she was a child, that she was a girl. And this is a wonderful definition of philosophy. So I wonder how your father kept his child alive, how he was still a child, even as a father. Can you tell something about this?
He was. That's why I say my dad was a fun dad, because everything we did together was fun. It was kind of like playing with a third friend. He was always that way. When we had snowball fights or we had to make snow angels, my dad was always the one that we did it with. My mom was always busy. She was always either cooking or working. My dad was the person that we played with and had fun with. Not to say my mom wasn't, but he was the one that would tell us the stories, make up the stories, make up the tell us a bedtime story at night. I think he was always, to a certain extent, the person that he had always been his whole life. I don't think he ever changed. I don't think he ever grew up. I think he was always the same as he was when he was little, because he just came across that way. I'm sure if you talk to friends of his or colleagues, they'll tell you that he told them a funny story or he related something funny about something that happened to him in life. That's just the way he was. I think he was just a child at heart. That's just the kind of person he was.
So yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that makes all sorts of sense, because it could be very difficult to bring philosophy for children without keeping your childhood inside or living as a child. And
Yes.
Karen, what would you like to say? This video will be listened from people everywhere in the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in South America, in Latin America, everywhere. What would you like to say to all these people that are celebrating together the 100 years of your father?
I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for thinking of my father, remembering my father, appreciating my father for the things that he did. I've run across, I believe on Facebook. I was on Facebook maybe 10 years ago for a little while, and I did run across a couple of his students, and I felt really bad because they were asking me questions that I really couldn't answer about my father's studies, but it really impressed me, and it really impressed on me the effect that my dad had on other people. I don't see that in my day-to-day life. I realize that. I'm very impressed with everything that my father did, but to run across students and other people that have worked with him, it always impresses me because I'm like, wow, my dad really affected so many people. So I just want to thank them for appreciating everything that he did, everything that he worked for and struggled for, and the work that he put out. And just for him himself, people that have met him, like yourself, that really appreciate him. I just want to thank you because I don't get to see that, I think, on a regular basis.
So thank you, Karen. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
In your name, thank you, your father. Thank you for being part of this wonderful idea that changed the life of so many people around the world. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
And hope we celebrate 100 years again soon.
We will.
Thanks, Walter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear
Thanks
Mom.
again, Karen, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Okay.
All right,
Thanks
take
a
good
lot.
care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.